Miami failed to land Kevin Durant, and more details have been reported on what and who Miami wasn't willing to include to get KD. Did they miss out on a great opportunity? And what does Miami do next as the Eastern Conference seems to be wide open? We answer that and more in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. For daily content on the Heat, click that subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure you are following us on your favorite podcast app. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Have a great show for you today. We're still reacting to the fallout of the Kevin Durant trade. We're going to talk about what Miami's options are now in a second. But first, David, I want to throw it to you because I did a show breaking down the news of the Kevin Durant trade on Sunday right after the news broke with intel on how trade talks broke down with the Heat. But we still have not talked since the trade was announced. What was your initial reaction when you saw the news?
Extremely disappointed. I'll be honest with you. I know there's a portion of the fan base that was like, oh, he's too old. He's washed. And we talked about that a lot leading up to the trade announcement and just the opportunity to cover an all-time great in Miami. It's just too much of a great opportunity for me personally. And so that was disappointing. He's a fantastic player. Again, a historically great player. I can't see any reason why you wouldn't want that kind of player on your team. And so I was disappointed. And just moreover, the idea is that he would be a great fit for this team. He is exactly what they've been missing even throughout the Jimmy Butler era. They did not have that number one go-to scorer that could grease the wheels to make offense easy. We've covered every game for the past 6 seasons since Jimmy Butler was acquired in 2019, and it's tiresome to watch this offense continuously break down and not be able to generate points the way the NBA game is played in 2025, the way it should be played. And Miami has found very few opportunities where they've made it look easy from a scoring perspective. And that is, if nothing else, and that's limiting what KD does, he is one of the best scorers in NBA history. And so that would have made things so much easier for this team. And it would just been a lot of fun to see how he would fit on this team. He would add a level of respectability and accountability that I think this team is missing right now without a true superstar on the roster. And I think that's something that's, again, to me, I feel extremely disappointed that they weren't able to finish the deal. And I'll say it. I'm disappointed that the front office didn't do it. I know that we'll talk a little bit more about the offer and what's been reported and everything else like that. And maybe it was unrealistic from Phoenix's perspective to ask for everything that they did and everyone that they did. And at the same time, I just feel like the front office could have done this differently. They've played their game too consistently for too long, and the results have always just been the same. And I'm not critical of the front office typically. I respect what they've done over the last 35 seasons of Pat's tenure here, 30 seasons of Pat's tenure. And yet I think they've just gotten into a little bit of a rut in how they operate, and they're not willing to give that extra inch. And it could wind up leading to something much better if they do. And so that's why there's a disappointment in not being able to acquire KD and disappointment in the front office for not doing enough to get KD.
The front office is, I don't know what they're feeling right now. Maybe there's a level of disappointment that Phoenix ultimately went with Houston's offer, but it sounds like, based on the reporting, had they really wanted Kevin Durant above all else, they could have offered all of the stuff and gotten him. So they're probably, I don't know if happy is the right word, but content with their decision. Because obviously, if they really wanted Kevin Durant, they would have offered all the stuff that it would have taken to get Kevin Durant if they valued him in that way. But to your point, I'm disappointed as well. I'm not so much disappointed that they weren't willing to throw all of it at Phoenix to get KD. That just doesn't feel like a thing a smart front office would typically do. Phoenix threw all of it to get KD, and look what happened to them, right?
Yep.
You still need other stuff in order to fill out the rest of the roster. Whether you keep that stuff or move that stuff, right? They weren't willing to include Nikola Jovic. Okay, it doesn't mean that Jovic was necessarily going to be part of the roster next year. It just meant that they couldn't trade all of it and not have the stuff, the assets that they would need to, add depth and pieces like that around Durant and Bam and Tyler Herro and things like that. So, but here's where I am disappointed. This is just another indictment on this front office in their gross mishandling of the Jimmy Butler situation. When they were trading Jimmy Butler, the only thing I kept saying was, you're not going to get a star back for Jimmy, but you better get the stuff back for Jimmy that helps you get a star down the road. And all the stuff they got for Jimmy Butler did not help them get Kevin Durant. It almost felt like a negative. The Andrew Wiggins contract, like Andrew Wiggins, Houston picked Dylan Brooks over Andrew Wiggins. There was jokes 2 years ago about Dylan Brooks playing in China.
Yep.
Phoenix chose Dylan Brooks over Andrew Wiggins. That's what you got for Jimmy Butler. You couldn't even get Jonathan Kuminga from Golden State to make things interesting. You couldn't get Brandon Podziemski. You couldn't get anything. The best thing you got in a roundabout way in the Jimmy Butler trade was Davion Mitchell, and he's not on your roster right now because he doesn't have a contract, so you can't trade him. They got nothing in that Jimmy Butler trade. They got played by Jimmy. Jimmy won the trade. Golden State won the trade, regardless of how it turns out. Because you got nothing that helped you put together pieces to go get your star player. You're just a roster now without Jimmy Butler.
Yeah.
This is why I said trade Jimmy last summer. It's why I said trade him in December. It's why I said trade him in January. They got nothing for Jimmy Butler that helped them to go get that next star. And that is a failure on the front office. It's a failure of foresight. It's a failure of leverage. It's a failure of everything. And the failure to get Kevin Durant now is just another indictment, an exhibit, whatever you want to call it, and how they screwed the pooch on the whole Jimmy Butler thing.
That's fair. I think, again, we've talked about it a number of times. They thought it was going to play out differently.
And they were wrong.
And that's kind of, they were wrong. And I think they were wrong. They've been wrong about KD. They were wrong about Jimmy. They were wrong about Dame. Maybe they were wrong about Donovan Mitchell, and who knows how actively any talks regarding Mitchell actually took place. They were wrong in 2023 at the trade deadline when they failed to acquire a legitimate power forward to help shore up their front court. So the problem is that I think after 30 years, and look, this front office and I think the Heat organization in general is always so forward thinking. They always see not just a bigger picture, but they're looking at the next picture and the next picture after that. And so I will always appreciate the way this team does things from a business ops perspective, from a basketball ops perspective. At the same time, I also feel like part of what makes this organization so special is that they tend to be very insular, and that's created a great family experience. But guess what? Sometimes you can get a little too comfortable. And not to say they're in a rut, because again, based on the level of success this organization has achieved, you can't be that overly critical.
Well, they are in a rut right now. They just finished.
But they're in a rut.
Yeah.
And I think what was once comfortable, and this is how we do things at this team, and this is how we operate, has turned into a little bit of complacency. And from people like Eric Spoelstra in particular, and I know he's not the one calling the shots on these kind of trade decisions, but for a guy like Eric Spoelstra, who has preached so consistently about change is good, we like a little bit of chaos, because when things break, that's how you can rebuild them and repair them in a new, different, and exciting way. It just feels like this front office isn't willing to do that. I know, paraphrasing a quote here, sometimes when you want to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs. And right now, this team is holding on to their dozen of pretty useless eggs a little too tightly, and they're not willing to do what it takes in order to make an omelet that could lead to a better championship or championship contention.
Yep. Again, I understand if you didn't think that trading all of this stuff for Durant got you closer to that contention, I get it. But to your point, this was a front office that had built up a reputation of always looking ahead, and time after time they have failed to see what was coming. If you thought Kevin Durant was going to be available this summer, why didn't you have a better offer ready to go? If you didn't see Kevin Durant coming, why didn't you if you didn't see Jimmy Butler doing what Jimmy Butler did, you should have traded him sooner. This team has actually been way behind in the last couple of years in terms of seeing where things were going, and that's really bit them in the butt. And we'll talk a little bit more about what they actually offered here, and their lack of actual assets to include a deal. But we'll do that here in a second. We're gonna take a quick break. We'll get to all of that. Plus, what should the Heat do now this offseason? We still have a whole offseason to go, David. It just started. The NBA Finals just ended on Sunday night. It is not hopeless. I refuse to believe that it's hopeless. So we'll talk about some of those options coming up next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, some entertainment here and there, well, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. They're your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. When you start using Monarch, you'll realize just how much you're spending on all those little things that maybe you can afford to cut back, whether it's food delivery or entertainment. Now, with Monarch Money, you'll be able to budget smarter and save more. And they're so convenient. It's an all-in-one app. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com and get 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Today's episode is also brought to you by Open Phone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber, a service provider of some kind. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? No, probably not. You moved on. And that's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. Open Phone lets you manage business calls and texts from a single app. They've got a shared inbox feature. It's a game changer. Your team can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat. And their AI agent handles after-hour calls, answering common questions and capturing leads, so you never miss a customer. Open Phone is offering my listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. And if your existing numbers have with another service, Open Phone will port them over at no extra charge. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. We'll be right back.
Here's what we do know about what the Heat offered for Kevin Durant. This is from Barry Jackson and Anthony Chang of the Miami Herald, who did some terrific reporting on this. The Heat's final offer included Andrew Wiggins, Terry Rozier, Jaime Jaquez Jr., Haywood Highsmith, and the 20th pick. Phoenix decided that they preferred Rozier over Duncan Robinson. Okay, surprising, but that's up to them. What Miami was not willing to include, maybe more important here, not willing to include Kel'el Ware, which is something that we had reported a couple weeks ago. And they were also reluctant to include Nikola Jovic or any additional future first-round draft pick capital. So just the 20th pick in this week's draft was all they were willing to include in terms of draft picks. Shams also reported that they were not willing to offer a package of the salary matching pieces, Jaquez, Jovic, Highsmith, and 20, or any future first-round picks. So the reporting from the Miami Herald, the reporting from ESPN all lines up here. And you know, I talked about this in the breaking news podcast that I did, David, about the lack of reading comprehension by Heat Twitter. Apparently, they were like, they weren't willing to include Jaime or Haywood or Jovic. No. It sounds like they were willing to include some of those pieces and a combination of those pieces, but not all of the pieces. What did you think about that?
I think it's a fair deal. I also think that I understand that perspective of not willing to give up everything. You don't want to do that. KD would have raised Miami's floor and ceiling for a couple of seasons, but ultimately you're going to have to look to our point in the first segment. You're going to have to look to the future. And the best way of doing that is by being able to retain young players with potential. And I think as good as Jaime has been, I think Niko Jovic and Kel'el certainly offer more from a potential perspective. And there's the draft. While I may not necessarily be a fan of replenishing through the draft because I think it's too unpredictable, I do recognize that that's your best way of adding cheap potential talent. And so that, to the front office's credit, makes a lot of sense. However, I still think they could have included one extra piece. I don't know if that would have taken Haywood off the table, because I don't think that they would have provided much value for Phoenix, really.
Seems like they wanted Haywood, which I get. $5 million, a cheap player who could be part of your rotation. I get it. What's the do you think that they are? Our friend of the show, Rohan Nadkarni, posted this on Twitter. He's like, I don't understand the obsession with Nikola Jovic. For Jovic to be, do you think Jovic deserves to be in this conversation with Kel'el Ware in terms of, I won't say untouchable generally, but at least untouchable in a Kevin Durant deal?
I think that's a little short-sighted on Rowan's part, because I mean, I think you're looking at the evolution of the league, and he's evolved as a defensive player. I wouldn't say he's necessarily a good defender, but I think he's at least a net neutral defensively. Like, he's not hemorrhaging points the way he did as a rookie, and he's evolved to that point. And I think the physical evolution that he's shown, his willingness to put on muscle and maximize his tools, I think will allow him to eventually be a plus defender. I do believe that he's going to be able to block shots. I think his sense of timing is going to be improved, and eventually he's going to be a better defender. But I think, again, you're looking at the league and you're looking to acquire as many two-way players as possible. And given what he can evolve on defensively and showing what he already has offensively, I do think he's worth keeping. I do like what he, as a skilled big player who again has the size of a big and the skill set of a wing or a ball handler. I don't think you can afford to give up on a guy like Nikola Jovic, because I think he's going to help unlock a lot of things. Maybe we're talking about a year or two down the road. Maybe injuries derail what could have been a really promising career. And again, I think, as you said, it's not that they weren't willing to include Jovic, is that they weren't willing to include Jovic on top of everything else that they were willing to offer. And in that case, that's Phoenix perhaps being a little greedy and recognizing, I think, that Miami was a little desperate to add KD's level of talent. And you know, give credit to the Suns front office for recognizing that and saying, you know what, we're going to try to extort you for everything possible. And Miami responding, well, go screw yourself. That's not what we're willing to do. I mean, we've got a bigger picture here.
Maybe to your point, if they do include Jovic, the 20th pick is off the table or something like that, right? Because you're just trying to maintain a certain amount of stuff in your asset inventory there. But he should not be part of the same conversation Kel'el Ware is a part of. I mean, come on. If you're on the phone to get Kevin Durant, because he doesn't, I love Nico, okay? I love interacting with him in the locker room, all these things. Like, he's a great guy. He also played 15 games, 46 games, and 46 games in his first 3 years. Guy can't stay on the court. He is unreliable in terms of the night-to-night, I don't know if it's effort, but engagement, production, whatever we want to call it. He's not a consistent player. He's not a healthy player. And I like him. And I think there's a ton of potential there. I really do. But we're talking about Kevin Durant here. I'm not saying trade Nico, get him off the team. But if you're on the phone with Phoenix to get Kevin Durant and you're not willing to include Nikola Jovic, then what are we doing? Like, you're on the phone to go get Kevin Durant. Do you want the 37-year-old or not? And I understand it from Houston's perspective, but even Houston, that's a better offer. They included the 10th pick in the draft. They included Jalen Green, who maybe they were a little bit, I don't think they were out on Jalen Green.
Come on.
Jalen Green is a better asset than Jovic.
They unloaded their Terry Rozier. I mean, Jalen Green.
I don't think it's as bad as a Terry Rozier thing.
Okay, I know I'm overstating things, but they unloaded a guy that they had zero faith in, and for good reason. Like, great that you had that 40-point night in March. What the hell did you do in the playoffs?
So maybe that's the Jaquez of their deal. And that contract is pretty tough looking, and I made that point. So I do think if you're Phoenix, maybe you prefer the combination of guys under team control, rookie scale salaries like Jaquez and Jovic over even Jalen Green. I could understand that as Phoenix's perspective. But ultimately, they had the 10th pick in the draft. Miami had the 20th pick in the draft. And I made this point on the show yesterday, David,
that's it.
Had Miami tanked at the end of the year the way that we were talking about, we're talking about maybe perhaps the number 1 pick in the draft if you end up getting the Cooper Flag luck, or something that could be 10 to 14. That's a lot more competitive. It's a top 10 pick versus a bottom 10 pick in the first round. That's a huge gap. So I don't know. I don't know if this was again. We only know very surface level stuff in terms of the details of these negotiations. But the next time somebody like Kevin Durant is available, Jovic can't be untouchable the way that Kel'el Ware is untouchable. That to me is he's somewhere between the other stuff that they offered and Kel'el Ware, but he's not the same level of Kel'el Ware.
No, I get that. I mean, the Ware potential as a floor spacing 7-footer who can block shots and has shown the ability to be, I think, somewhat switchable defensively.
And has 3 more years on a rookie contract where Jovic is up for an extension. You know?
Yeah, I think there's that. I'm not going to be dismissive of Jovic's potential. I just also recognize that they didn't want to include him on top of everything else because that was probably asking too much from Phoenix's side.
Again, and I understand it. But let's go ahead.
No. I just you brought this up earlier, and does Miami not recognize the Eastern Conference as being? I think you kind of not see the acquisition of Kevin Durant as putting them in legitimate title contention, and maybe that's why they weren't as aggressive.
I wonder what happens if everybody waits until Monday to make this trade, and they see Tyrese Halliburton go down.
Yeah,
and I wonder if you include Nico then.
Yeah,
that's a fascinating what if. That is a fascinating what if, and I wouldn't be surprised if people in Miami's front office right now were kicking themselves a little bit. Again, I don't know that I have a problem with not including all of this stuff. I guess I have a problem with the phrasing and some of this reporting in terms of like Jovic being on the same level of, I don't know. Again, they probably made the right decision by not including everything, but it is still emotionally frustrating and disappointing nonetheless. And the original sin was not handling the Jimmy Butler thing right. Because if you handled the Jimmy Butler thing right, then you have multiple Jovic's on the roster. You have multiple Hawkeyes. You have more things that you could potentially include in a Butler in a Durant deal that you just didn't have this time around. But let's talk about what Miami's options are this offseason. Plus, how can they rebuild their asset inventory? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Listening to this show, why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, it's fast to pay out, and it makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether you're placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right in the 9th inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you're part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and you get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. We'll be right back.
So what do the Heat do now? We'll talk about their draft assets and their just asset inventory here in a second, but we have a couple days until the draft. They still have the 20th pick in this draft. The way I see it, they can go a couple of different ways. They can go try to make a trade for another big name scoring type of player. They could rearrange some of the deck chairs with some lateral moves. They can wait until 2026 when they have a ton of cap space potentially available. Or they could blow it up, which you and I don't think that they're going to go that route. But let's talk about the names first. Like, are there any names that you're looking at now that Durant has been traded? Doesn't look like Giannis is getting moved here. Who are you looking at, if anybody?
Nobody. I don't think there's anybody available. I just think I think the Halliburton injury on top of the Tatum injury on top of Cleveland and New York somewhat getting a little exposed. I think I talked about this in our last episode of last week. The idea of parity is more prevalent and real than it ever has been before in my 30 plus years of watching the NBA. This notion, I don't think anybody has felt this way since that brief 2-year gap when Michael Jordan retired in 94 and 95. Like, holy cow. Now all of a sudden, and it's anybody, it's up for anybody here. The Knicks could have won it, the Magic could have won it, the Rockets, obviously they won 2 in a row. But there were so many more teams that were in position to win a title at that time because perhaps the best player of all time, Michael Jordan, had retired temporarily for a year and a half, only to come back even stronger for another three-peat. So I think you're kind of looking at something similar in that sense, is that right now, Oklahoma City may have a stranglehold, but even that doesn't feel. I mean, Indiana took them to 7 games. Had Halliburton stayed healthy, they might have dethroned Oklahoma City. And this whole idea of starting a dynasty, as so many people are writing and talking about today, has been shelved for another year. And so I think every team can be exposed or beat in a right way. Nobody feels insurmountable. This isn't the big 3. This isn't LeBron in Cleveland. This isn't Jordan in Chicago. It's much, much more wide open right now. And so I don't know. I just feel like there's the idea that we can all be competitive and try to make a move in order to be competitive is something that's felt very realistically around the league.
At the same time, this roster is not good enough, even in a wide open
East.
Doubt. And no doubt. So I'm looking at what comes next, and the names that are out there are the names that are out there. The DeMar DeRozan backup plan, do they circle the wagons on Lauri Markkanen? And it's like, all right, whatever. I'm not getting excited about any of that stuff. But maybe this is a situation where I'm not going to get excited. And this is a team for years that has punted on the idea of going out and just adding incrementally better pieces, depth pieces, high-level rotation players even. And has just been chasing star after star after star, only to fail and fail and fail and strike out and strike out and strike out over and over and over again. So maybe now it's the time to just say, you know what, screw it. There are no stars available. Durant's gotten traded. Giannis is off the table. At least we're not waiting around until the training camp with the Damian Lillard situation again like we did in 2023. We've got the draft coming up. Free agency is shortly after that. We got a mid-level exception. We have a huge, chunky $16 million trade exception. Let's take some good players in and see what happens. And so this kind of gets me to the asset inventory part of this. And we can do, I don't think they're going to blow this up and rebuild, right?
No.
But you look at what the Thunder did.
Yep.
They are proof that rebuilds don't take that long. They don't take as long as they used to. You looked at a rebuild like, oh my God, you're going to be bad for a decade in the past. Look at the Thunder. They traded Paul George and Russell Westbrook in 2019. They won a championship 6 years later. 5 years until they were really in the conversation winning a bunch of games, right? They were number 1 in the West last year. So it took them 5 years to get to the point of, we can win the whole damn thing. That's not that long, if you think about it. Especially compared to what these rebuilds used to be like, as long as you handle it right. Right? You got to do it right. You can also have a Utah situation or a Philadelphia situation where it just seemingly takes forever. But even there was years in Philadelphia where it felt like they had a chance, right? It wasn't like, I mean, it's depressing now, but it wasn't always depressing. There was big time moments of excitement for Sixers fans in, spots. But I don't think that they're going to do that, but they got to do something in terms of adding to their asset collection. And so maybe instead of looking at OKC, you look at the team that they just beat in Indiana, where a year ago they go out, or in 2023, in the summer of 2023, they give Bruce Brown this huge contract. And then that's the big contract that helps them get Pascal Siakam. And it feels like that's the next thing for Miami. You didn't have anything that anybody wanted. Okay. Go sign those players. Go acquire those players. That's what I would be spending the summer doing. Go get those players. Use the trade exception. Use the mid-level exception. Make lateral moves just to shake something loose, kind of shake the snow globe, and maybe turn these things that nobody wants into a chance to get something that somebody does want. Or just a player who pops and ends up being an important piece for you, right? Maybe it isn't your Tyrese Halliburton that you're going to go find in your second draft, but maybe it's an Aaron Nesmith. Maybe it's an Obi Toppin. Imagine if this team had an Obi Toppin on the roster. And if that would have gotten them over the top in a Houston package, or 2 Obi Toppins or something. That stuff just helps you. You need multiple things. And so if I'm Miami, that's what I'm doing. There is no star available. So what are we going to do? We're not going to just sit here and wait for 2026, because I don't think that's going to work. I would be going out and trying to find real helpful pieces, not only to help us win now and get out of this play-in tournament mix, because I think that's really important, But also, they're going to help us win now. Maybe we can flip them by the trade deadline, by next summer, to get that piece that we're really looking for.
You asked about names. I see more like possibilities or whatever, however you want to term it. There are two names that I could see them going all in for a pursuit of, and that would require perhaps something unrealistic from Miami's perspective. I think you should go all in for Anthony Edwards. And if that means trading Tyler Herro plus everything else that you weren't willing to include for Kevin Durant, I think you do that.
Right now?
Because again, from that, what's that?
You think like now? Like you're calling Minnesota today?
Yeah.
You think Anthony Edwards is gettable?
I don't. I think they failed to land KD, which means that they recognize that they're going to be in a stuck situation. I know their finances are going to be tough. You've got free agency issues with Julius Randle. Stranger things have happened. So if you offer an all-star and Herro plus stuff and give Minnesota, we just talked about Minnesota is very good. They were willing to include Rudy Gobert perhaps in a trade for KD. You've got Randall's situation there. It's good that you have a guy like DiVincenzo on the roster. Naz Reid is not a perfect solution. I'm just saying, as good as Anthony Edwards is, and maybe you can make him the focus, I think you can also, for a team that's right there and poised to be better than they even were this year, if you can acquire, let's say, a Herro level type player and get all the other players on the side there to help bolster what they can do, that might make them better. And they have to sacrifice a tremendous superstar talent, which is something that Miami needs. And then let Miami go through the process of rebuilding around Bam and Edwards. And
well, I can tell you,
maybe,
if you're gonna get Edwards, it's gonna cost you Bam.
Not necessarily, right? It could. I mean, couldn't it be Herro and everything else?
Herro and 3 first-round picks.
Herro and 3 first-round picks and all the other players.
Nico, Kel'el.
Yeah.
Maybe. I would be shocked. I would be shocked if Minnesota traded Anthony Edwards right now.
No doubt.
Yes. Like that. But to your point, you call, right? Don't you just start at the top of the list and you call. You call Oklahoma City about Shea. It's like, hey, you got the championship. You done with this guy? Like you start calling. Start at the top of the list. And
you really like Jalen Williams. I mean, I know he was a good secondary star, but can you really see him flourishing there? No, I mean, you do whatever it takes. I think the other name you might inquire about, and I don't know how realistic this is, but given Miami's Duke connection and everything else in the front office, Zion Williamson is a name worth exploring.
You should at least call. It's interesting. And this is probably a whole episode that we can do on like names and kind of pros and cons and stuff. But you start calling. I don't know if you offer the same package you offered for Durant for Zion. There's so many more questions with Zion.
No, yeah.
But you offer a version of it. A trimmed down version,
watered down version. Yeah.
And you start calling. You have to start calling. And if you can't do that, then I say go out and just get the best free agents you can find. Like go sign Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Right? That guy would be awesome on this team. Just go get a bunch of good, helpful players who you can rally around and help the team. Because you can't just wait for the star. It's pointless. You have to go get stuff. You have to go get stuff. And maybe it's a bridge to the star later. But go get stuff. You have 2 all-stars on this team. This team's not going to win a championship. But you got Tyler Herro. You got Bam Adebayo. Go add some real pieces. Make Jovic and Jaquez and Kel'el Ware earn their minutes with real pieces on the roster around them. Yeah. And figure it out. But add some real pieces. Add some pieces that people want. Add some pieces that can help you right now.
I would also call Sam Presti and see if they want to take on Tyler Herro's contract, and in order to build like an even better dynasty there, and see what he's willing to include in an acquisition like that. Because I think if you're talking about asset building, then that's certainly one way of doing it. I know it seems unrealistic.
I mean, unrealistic for who? Oklahoma City can do it. Miami can do it.
Yeah,
that's the way to. That's the sort of thing that helps you retool your asset collection in terms of the draft capital.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And Houston also included 5 second-round picks in this trade. Miami can't get close to 5 second-round picks. I don't know how much that swayed it one way or the other, but it's just you just look down the list of the things that Houston offered, and Miami doesn't have anything like those things.
Right.
And they had all of those things and didn't even have to give up their best stuff. right? Like Miami could have been like, you know what, fine, here's Kel'el Ware at the very end, and Houston still could have been like, okay, fine, here's 2 more first-round picks. Okay, here's Jabari Smith Jr. Here's Reed Shepherd. Like they could have beaten Miami's best offer instantly. So they have some work to do. Fortunately for them, it's the beginning of the offseason. It's the beginning of the offseason for us. We have a ton of content coming out this week and going forward. The NBA draft first round is Wednesday night. We'll have coverage of the draft for you then. We'll have a bunch more on the Kevin Durant fallout, free agency, the offseason trade topics, all that stuff before then, after it, and throughout the week and on. But for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NBA Big Board Show. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.